Okay, everybody, so it's 1:30. So welcome everybody to our Biodiversity and Pollinators session number 6. If you've joined us before, you know that every week at Friday at 1:30, we look at different aspects of biodiversity and pollinators. Today, we're going to be focusing on the features of native Australian bees, and they are some amazing creatures. We're going to learn all about their features and how they are great pollinators. So I'll just get started with you guys. And before we launch into our lesson, it's really important that we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. And where I am, it's the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. And like all Aboriginal people, the Gadigal were fantastic at sustainability, managing their environment. And I know that they would have gotten honey from Australian native bees as well, but they only took what they needed and they made sure there was enough for everybody coming after them. Okay, so our expectations today, guys, because we are in a school lesson. Okay, I'm the principal of a school and my teachers are here with me. So we just want you to be safe, and that means you won't be able to turn your camera and microphone on. You won't be able to use the chat or the Q&A. But like I said, if you have a question, you can write it on the evaluation at the end and we'll answer any questions that you have. We value your positive participation, and I am going to put a poll up in a minute to get some information from you. And we hope that you have a great time with us today. So the first thing I'm going to do is put up our first poll, and I'm sure if you've already been with us before, you know what to do. There are 4 quick questions for you to answer there, which are about you. So I've put the poll up. First question is, what group are you in? The second question is, what year are you in? The third question is, what are you interested in learning about? And the last question is, how many people are watching at your place today? And that gives us some great data or information to help plan more fantastic webinars for you in the future. Okay, so I can see lots of people answering those questions. Thank you so much. Great to see so many of you here today as well. We hope that you're going to learn a lot in the next 30 minutes about our amazing Australian native stingless bees. Maybe you have some bees in your school playground. Maybe you have some bees at home that you have looking after. Or maybe you know where there's a hive of bees, or you've seen some bees in the bush or in the garden around your house. So those bees, as we know, are really important pollinators. Okay, I can see nearly all of you. I'll just give you about half a minute to finish answering those questions, and then we can have a look at everybody's answers so that we know who's here today. Thanks for participating, guys. We really appreciate it. Okay, well, it looks like most people have finished now, so I'll just share those results with you so that you can see. So it looks like, again, it's great that so many, almost 100% of you, 96% are students, and we have a couple of teachers here today, which is great. Most of you this time are in year 5 and 6, and we also have some year 7 and 8s here today, which is great too. So welcome students from year 7 and 8. Looks like most people are interested in learning about animals, so that's great, 60% of you, and this was a multiple choice question, so you can answer more than one. We're going to be learning about lots of these things today: animals, the environment, nature, and of course we have other webinars too on history and geography, and I might tell you about a fantastic one coming up, not this Monday, but next Monday, that you might tell your teachers about. And finally, looks like most people are watching by themselves, but a couple of you are with other people as well. So welcome to everybody today. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that with you now, and we're going to be moving on to our next slide, and I'm going to let Nicole take over, our resident bee expert, and she's going to tell you all about our beautiful pollinators. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks so much, Glenn, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you again. If you are new, hopefully you will catch up quickly because I like to revisit a lot of information, but also hope you're going to be learning lots of different things today and some facts that you never ever knew before and that you can share with other people. I like starting with this slide because I know we're talking about bees today, but it's always important to recognize that bees aren't our only pollinators. Pollinators are absolutely vital to our ecosystems and our health and well-being. And we can see a few here, a variety of different pollinators here covered in pollen from their visits from flower to flower. On the left-hand side, you can see there's a bee there also covered in pollen. So we can get a really good idea of how that pollen gets moved around as the animals are coming for a nice sweet drink of nectar and collecting pollen for their home. So today, as I said, we're focusing on bees. Looking at our next slide, we can see there a really great detailed picture of a bee body. So no matter what type of a bee or where it lives, these are the parts of their body. Often I'm asked how you tell the difference between a bee and a fly. Bees have two sets of wings and flies only have one. So that's one of the differences that's really interesting to note and look out for when you're outside later. But also to think that they were related into the same group of animals that are wasps, ants, and sawflies. So they're all related to each other, which I think is really interesting. We can see that bees have 6 legs, 4 wings, 3 body parts, and 5 compound eyes. Compound eyes means that it looks like it's one big eye, but it's made up of many, many, many smaller eyes. And we're going to look soon at the incredible way that bees see flowers different to us. When we look at bees more closely, there's an incredible variety of bees around the world. They can range in size from 2 millimeters to 40 millimeters. And I thought it would be really interesting for you to see the difference between the largest in the world and the smallest in the world. So the one that is up on the top left there is the smallest bee. It's a tricky name, the Quasi-Hesma bee, which actually is found in North Queensland. So that's amazing. And they're really very, very tiny, 2 millimeters long. And the largest, which is the Wallace's giant bee, and we can see it there compared to the European honeybee. So just also to say the comparison picture for the Quasi-Hema on the top left is with our green carpenter bee. So when we look at the poster in a minute, you can maybe spot that bee and realize the incredible tiny, tiny size of the Quasi-Hesma bee. So that's really amazing. Some facts that I thought I would share with you today is to help us understand how bees came about. So they actually are wasps. They came from the same, evolving together with wasps. But now when we look at the differences between them, it's actually mostly in their behavior. Bees have become vegetarians, whereas the wasps aren't. Also, a long time ago, they decided to focus more so the bees on flowers, to be visiting and gathering their pollen and their food from. So again, different to wasps, although wasps are also recognized as pollinators. So that's very interesting. And the other one is about their body changes, particularly the way the bees are able to collect pollen in sacs on their legs, and also the change that has happened in the stinging capacity and what the end point of that is for a bee as opposed to a wasp. So a wasp can keep stinging, a bee can sting only that once and then it will die. So I thought that's something that you can do maybe some more research into, but we can also see similarities between them still, like in their coloring, although they look now, their body shape particularly, quite different to what the bees would have looked like originally when they were more like a wasp. There are around 2,000 native bees in Australia. Now, this is something that really was such a surprise to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well. Up until about 3 years ago, I also only ever thought bees were the European honeybees with the black and yellow stripes that could sting you. And so I was amazed to find that not only are there 2,000 native bee species in Australia, but they're living all around us. It's a matter of knowing what you're looking for and where to look for them and when. Our bees here in Australia have evolved, so have grown together with our native plant species. So many of them are what you would call a specialist. They need to go and visit particular types of flowers only, whereas others are more what are called generalists, which is like a European honeybee that can visit many different types of flowers. But whether they're the introduced bee or our native bee, ecosystems cannot survive without them. So they're very, very critical animals in our ecosystems. So our Australian native bees also live as varied as they are, and we'll see soon how many different types there are. They also have different homes. So they can be found in many different areas as well as in different materials as well. And we're going to have an opportunity to look closer into that and even make something for the bees at your place, which is really exciting. So we're also going to be looking more closely at the fact that there are social bees, so bees that live in a colony like the European honeybee, and solitary Australian bees, which live by themselves. The social bees tend to be active all year, whereas the solitary bees are a bit more particular about the time of year that they are more active, and particularly when the special flowers they need are in bloom. So it's really incredible to imagine that there's some bees out there living all by themselves, not in a group like we're used to thinking of with the European bee. When I showed you before about the body of the bee and the fact they have these incredible compound eyes that are made up of many, many smaller eyes, this is actually a picture here on the top right of how the bees see a flower. It's very different to us, and you can do all sorts of incredible research about the UV spectrum, how bees are able to see elements of that UV spectrum or parts of light that we can't see. They have an incredible 280-degree field of vision. So if you think a full circle is 360 degrees, they can almost see around an entire circle, around their entire head, which is pretty amazing. And it says there, if they were a superhero, then sight would be their superpower because of the way they can see. They also have the ability, as we can see in this picture, to see almost like a target area of a flower, which is where the part is that they're aiming for sweet nectar to drink and pollen to collect. So it's almost like there being a dart going into a target. They can see it very, very clearly. They can also see very quickly. They're able to fly around and quickly pick up which flowers are the ones that they need to be looking for their food sources. So that's pretty amazing. They also use the sun and light that we can't see either to navigate. So they know where they are based on all of these aspects in light in the sky that we're not able to see, but they are. So it's almost like a GPS system built in through their eyes. Looking at the next few pictures, we can see even more examples of this with their color vision that they can see, and they can not necessarily, they're able to pick the particular flower that they're looking for. Even out of a huge field of flowers, they'd be able to find the one they need. So the patterns on the petals, as we can see, here is described as a landing deck. And these are some other good examples with different colors, the way that they would be seeing the colors as opposed to how we see the colors. So they have over a long period of time developed the ability to be very, very efficient at finding their food sources, because of course it uses a lot of energy to be flying around when you're really, especially if you're really, really hungry. We're going to cross over to Tristan now, who's going to show us a little bit more about how you can create an artwork as if you were looking through the eyes of a bee. Thanks, Tristan.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, guys. Great to see you again. And Nicole's right. We're going to do some artwork today. And we're inside for a change because they had forecast rain. So I'm not sure what it's like at your place today, but to my place, it's getting ready to rain. So we're inside to do our artwork today. But we have brought some things with us. So we've got our journal again, and I'm just going to flick through some of the things that we've already done in our series about biodiversity and pollinators and get us to the page where we're looking at the bees. And I thought today I might do my artwork on this page here, and we're going to be looking at that artwork that Nicole was talking about, and I'll show you here. I've got it. You can see that dotted pixelated picture of a bee's eye view. So today, I'm going to be doing a bee's eye view of these purple daisies here. Now, I'm using some paints, and I get my paints from Aldi. So if you haven't got any paints, you might get those from your local $2 shop. And I'm going to be using, instead of a paintbrush, I'm going to be using a Q-tip. So this is what I'm going to be using to get that dotted effect. On our website, as Glenn mentioned earlier, there is a Blackline Master that you can download to help you with your drawing. But today, I've just drawn my sketch in my nature journal. So I think you can see that there. I'll just move it around a little bit more. And you can see that I've already penciled in the petals of the flower. And I'm going to start with the painting. So I'm using my Q-tip, and I've got my paints here. Now, I noticed in the picture that Nicole had shown us that it appears a little bit blurry. So when I get my paint on the Q-tip, I'm going to be dotting. I think this might take me a long time. I'm using a couple of different purple colours there and dotting to give that impression of the blurred picture. So just as Nicole said, that's how the bees see when they're looking. They don't see a clear outline like we do. Instead, they see all those little, it's almost pixelated, the picture, and it blurs. So they do look for their favourite colours. I know Nicole was mentioning last time, or it might have been a few weeks ago now, that I think bees liked the colour purple. It was one of their favourite colours for when they were searching for pollen. So I know that's why we grow a lot of purple things in our yard. I know the bees in our yard like the lavender at the moment. I wonder what sorts of plants they're using in your gardens at the moment. So you can see the repetitive dotting gives that, instead of that clear, concise line, it gives a bit of a blurred image. I think I'm going to label this one as a bee's eye view when I put my labels on it. Okay, and I'll keep going. I don't think I'm going to get this finished today, but you get the idea. Remember, I'm using a Q-tip to do my dots. I've used my paint. I've made up some colours here. You can see I've got a big blob of white with some colours around the outside. So that'll give us a bit of a mix. So it looks more like that picture that we had seen. Remember, all of this information is on our website, including a copy of the Blackline Master of the flowers here. In case you're not confident to draw your own, you can download that one and use that from our website. I think this might take me a lifetime. Maybe I can work on this, Nicole, as you give some more information. I might share it before my next session. I'm going to head back over to you guys. Thanks so much for coming to me.
Thanks, Tristan. That looks really so beautiful and very relaxing. I think I'm definitely going to have a go at that when I get a chance a bit later, something to do over the weekend. So again, I was mentioning before, and we saw a picture of the European honeybee and one of our native Australian bees. Now, for those of you who are with us right back in the beginning of our series, back in number 1 and number 3, we looked more closely at the difference between honeybees and the Australian bees. So it's important to understand that the European honeybee was brought to Australia over 200 years ago from Europe. And so that was when Australia was colonized, and the colonizers brought over a lot of the food plants they were familiar with and wanted to grow in Australia. And they knew that the European honeybee was the main pollinator of those plants. So they brought the European honeybee over with them. The European honeybee has been incredibly successful around the world because they can be active over a lot of different temperature ranges, weather conditions, and they are generalist feeders, so can go to many different plants. On the right-hand side of this picture is one of our native Australian bees called the Tetragonula carbonaria. We'll soon see close up how different they actually are. But it's important to understand that they do look quite different. They're all black and they don't have stripes as well. It's important to realize they are one of our stingless bees, one type of our stingless bees, so they don't have a stinger. So that's important to understand too. Your thinking about bees will be completely changed, hopefully, after our presentation today. Tristan was actually really lucky because her avocado tree was flowering in her garden, and she went up really nice and close to look at the flowers and noticed that there were both European honeybees and the Tetragonula carbonaria Australian native bee on the flowers. Let's have a look at that. How great was that video? So if you have an avocado tree in flower, or there's one in your neighborhood, they are quite common, have a closer look and see what you can notice. Wasn't it just amazing to see that tiny Tetragonula carbonaria bee with its legs full of pollen and its pollen carrying sacs? And also the fact that they are cooperatives, that they're on that same plant together. There seemed to be plenty of food for all of them. So I don't think that they had to compete about that. So that's interesting to notice as well. When we look at this picture here, we can see lots of interesting information about the Tetragonula carbonaria. We can see there's a map of Australia there showing where they live around Australia. So we can see we're lucky enough here in Sydney that they are common here around particularly where I live, but also going up into the warmer regions of Australia. So that's where the most common areas for the Tetragonula carbonaria is around Australia. We can also see here the size difference, as I mentioned. So the Tetragonula carbonaria is almost a quarter of the size of a European honeybee. And when you look at them in their coloring, they are clearly very different. And on the right-hand side there, you can see how tiny it is compared to the head of a match. Looking at the information also where it says 11 of our species of the almost 2,000 are stingless, and the Tetragonula carbonaria is one of those. On the slide here with the poster, this is just New South Wales alone, the variety of our native bees in New South Wales. So even before you have a good closer look, you can see there's so many different colors. We can see the shadow marking of the size of each of those bees. So they are different sizes as well. And some of them are quite differently shaped too. On the bottom right-hand side of the poster is the European honeybee, and it's there just as a comparison. So it is not a native Australian bee, but it's a good comparison to make there. But also what jumps out to me are the incredible bright blues and yellows and greens. There's also neon colored cuckoo bees in there, some really fun, funny names, the teddy bear bee as well. So I really encourage you to explore this a little bit more and tell everyone all these incredible things that you're learning and the cool names that you've now discovered about our variety of native bees just in New South Wales. That's not even across the whole of Australia. So that's really amazing. Just like there's a variety of different looking bees, they also have a variety of different homes, native bee homes. And we can see here on this slide some great examples of some wild hives that you could be finding out in your area. So again, now that you know what to look for, then you'll be able to recognize it and know who may be living in there and have a closer look. The top two on the right, so the middle at the top and the right-hand side of the top, those are hives that would have been, that it might be harder for you to find, but if you are looking really nice and close in some hollows of some trees, you might be able to find something like that. But it's an incredible variety of shapes as well. We can see there, the top right-hand one is the Tetragonula carbonaria hive. So they are a social bee. They have worked together to make that hive, just like European honeybees work together to make their hive. But then on the complete diagonal opposite of this slide, the bottom left, that's a burrowing bee. So one of the solitary bees burrowing into some dirt, which is where their home is. So that's also something pretty amazing we're going to learn some more about. Looking into the Tetragonula carbonaria hive that I mentioned, we can see here, Glenn, if we just go back one slide, please, to where we're looking more closely into the Tetragonula carbonaria hive. There's not one in between. That's okay. The spiral shaped one, just to explain that in the spiral, we've got the different areas, which is the brood area where the babies are, the eggs, the queen eggs as well, the queen cells in there too. So in the social bees, there is also this system where it is a caste system. That is what it's called, a caste system, where everybody has a particular job. And there are drones, queens, and workers. The drones are passing on the genes, so that's their main job. The queen is who makes all the babies, and she can make thousands of babies in a day, which is just unbelievable. And the workers, which are females but aren't able to make babies, are there doing all the work inside the hive, making sure it's clean, the babies are being fed, they have everything they need, all the pollen to eat, making the honey, and all of those important things about keeping a house healthy and all the inhabitants happy. So that's the workers' job, is that's what they do. So everyone has their particular task. So we can see there that there's a few males, many workers, and one queen in a social beehive. So that's the Tetragonula carbonaria one down the bottom, and the honeybee hive up the top, the European honeybee hive up the top. When we go now and look a little closer, there it is, into the Tetragonula carbonaria hive. I just wanted to show you because it's just so amazing. The left-hand side, we can see this beautiful spiral shape. Those where there are closed circles, they're babies developing inside there. And when they're open, that means the baby has come out. In the second one along, the B, one labeled B with an arrow, we're pointing at a queen cell. So the queen cell will get larger, and from that cell, the queen will be born, or the princess she's called, before she is mated with by the male. So that will be the princess growing up in there. And then on the right-hand side, we can see the mated queen, and she's very well fed, and she's full of eggs ready to lay those. So these are built usually in a very well protected hive type of an area, deep in a hollow usually. So it's quite hard to find a queen. They're usually very good at hiding and are very well protected. But now that I thought it would be fun for you to know what to look for, you might get lucky enough to see one. So that's social bees. There's also solitary bees I mentioned before, which means they live by themselves. Sometimes we find solitary bees are good at sharing spaces or living nearby each other, but a lot of the time they are living by themselves. So what that means is they are making burrows. A lot of them, the majority, as we can see, 70% of our native Australian bees are solitary. They live alone, and most of those are burrowing bees. Now, that is something I never considered possible. But now that I know that, I'm always looking out for the holes in the ground that might give me a clue about a solitary bee nesting underneath the ground. So we've got some names there of some from the poster that are burrowing bees. They can go to over 1 meter deep. And we can see there as well in that picture, looking down under the soil, how they set their different sections where they're laying their eggs underneath the soil. So thinking about that, the solitary bees living by themselves makes it also really hard to find them. But now that you know a bit more about what to look for, you might also get lucky and use a great observation skills and be able to spot one of these incredible solitary bees. Glenn, I think we're going to be doing a poll now about where do the bees live.
Yep, so I'm just launching that poll, everybody. So let's see if you are learning what Nicole just told you. And the question is pretty simple. Where do we find most Australian bees living? And I think the answer might even be right in front of you if you look carefully. All right. Looks like most people are putting their answer in. This time it's only a single choice, so it's not multiple choice. So you've only got 3 to choose from. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to end that poll there. And let's share our results. Okay, so it looks like sort of even between underground and in a hive. Okay, but remember Nicole did say that 70% of our native Australian bees are solitary and burrowing. So the answer would be the underground mainly. Most of our Australian native bees live underground, so they're solitary. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that one there and back over to Nicole, I think. Let's see. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks so much, Glenn. And I just wanted to say, well done, everyone. Really good thinking. I think, Glenn, that it can also be a little bit of how you think about it. Absolutely, underground is where most of our Australian native bees live. But if you're thinking about colonies of thousands of bees, there's lots of those. And so it could be something that you could think 2 ways about. But well done. And I can see you're listening fantastically. There's a fact here I thought I'd love to share with you, which is that Australian native bees have developed a special way of getting their pollen called buzz pollination, which is really amazing. The picture here is showing you a blue-banded bee staying a slight distance from the flower, and they're flapping their wings in a particular way at a particular speed to get the exact right frequency or sound wave for the flower to release its pollen. So it's almost I wouldn't say lazy, because they've still got to do a lot of work to flap those wings, but it's a way of not having to necessarily enter the flower so deeply that they can get the flower to release its pollen almost in a puff, so that they can get access to that more quickly. And amazingly, tomatoes, capsicums, and blueberries are pollinated in this way. So that tells me none of those foods were here before Australia was colonized. So amazingly, there's been an adaptation of some of our bees to the food sources that have come in and to gain that food for themselves. So that's really amazing. As I mentioned, there are different materials that different solitary bees use to make their homes. And here are just 3 examples that I wanted to share with you. So there's masked and resin bees are a couple of examples of our Australian native bees, and they really like to look for thick wood to make their homes. So they actually spend a lot of time digging these holes into wood to make a tunnel to lay their babies in, which we can see there in the middle section of that top row for the masked and resin bees. And the pictures of each of those are on the right-hand side. The resin bee has the bright orange abdomen, and on the far right is the masked bee, and you can see how that got its name. It's a very cool looking bee. The next one down is the leaf cutter, the resin as well, and reed bees, who like to make their home in what we call pithy stem bundles. So if you can almost imagine like the center of a bamboo, if you've ever had a play with some bamboo and you've noticed there's a hole through the middle, the native bees will either use that kind of wood or make the holes themselves in other types of stems, and that's where they will lay their eggs. On the far left of this picture is really amazing, because that's the leaf cutter bee. It's making that would have been inside a pithy stem, using the cut leaves to make a nice, comfortable, cozy home and opportunity for the babies to grow really nice and healthy and well insulated and warm in there. So that's really amazing too. And we can see that on the right-hand side, the tunnel that they use. And the bottom row, we can see mud bricks. which are what blue-banded bees like to use. So not bricks necessarily, they're looking for mud. So any hard mud material, that's a perfect place for a blue-banded bee to make their home underground. So there are ways of helping our blue-banded bees, which we're going to look at soon with Tristan, but that's pretty amazing. That's what they're looking for. So it tells me we need to be thoughtful about not always covering all the ground around us, because then we can provide opportunity for a lot of these solitary native Australian bees to make their homes. So here we go. Over to you, Tristan. I'm so excited to see what we're going to be making with you, which type of Australian native bee we're going to make a home for.
Hi, Nicole. Welcome to Tristan in the Kitchen. We are going to be making mud pies today. Well, not actually mud pies. We're actually going to make a home for a blue-banded bee. So I am working inside, and I'm going to tell you this as a warning before you start. You must ask mum or dad or both if you can play with mud in the kitchen before you start. I'm the mum in my house, so I've given myself permission to make mud pies in the kitchen today. I have brought in some clay. So I've got this clay that was a bit dried out, and I've put in some water. I've been soaking it so it's nice and mushy. I've also got some sand, so different types of sand. This sand looks like the sort of sand that you might find on a tennis court, and this sand is a little bit finer. So we're going to mix together the ingredients to make a home for a blue-banded bee. So I'm going to add my gritty sand, and I'm mixing. Oh, it looks very mushy. Don't you love playing with the mud? I think more people should play with mud. Yes, definitely a great mix. And I'm going to add also some fine sand. I'm trying to get it nice and thick so I can build it into my mold, which I've got here. So remembering, as Nicole mentioned, the blue-banded bees like to dig into the ground to make their nests, but they don't mind it if you give them a bit of a hand. In fact, I like to give bees a hand in our yard. As some of you might have known who have been to my in this video conference before, I've got bees in my backyard, but we've also got homes for native bees too. We've actually got a home like this. And you see that one? So lots of different creatures can live in that one, not just the bees. But we've also got some bamboo like this, as Nicole mentioned. You see that little stick of bamboo? And it allows animals to crawl in there. So I'm hoping that we might get some carpenter bees or something like that. Okay, my mud mixture's getting pretty good. Now, when I read about this, the mud mixture needs to be nice and thick so you can hold it in your hand. So I'm about to do that now. Oh yeah, look at that. Perfect. Can you see that blob in my hand? And I'm going to add it into my pot. Perfect. I suppose this is a good thing about working in the kitchen because I'm really close to the sink for when I'm finished I can clean my hands. Now I'm adding that in, which looks like the perfect mixture. So the clay will probably help it to dry and set a little bit, but the sand will make it so that the bees can actually move it back out again. Now I've got my container filled up. It's just an old plant pot that I'm using here. And I'm going to put a big hole. So I'm using an old stick to put a big hole in the middle, like that. Can you see the hole? And then I'm going to leave that to dry. And then hopefully I'll be able to pop it out of my plant pot and put it on the ground somewhere so a blue-banded bee can find it. I'm hoping that I can make lots of them and I could put them together to make a community like what Nicole mentioned before. So remembering, before you do mud pies in the kitchen, you have to ask mum. And you can find these ingredients, the sand and the dirt and even bits of clay, probably somewhere close to yourself in your backyard. Remembering, just because you build the house doesn't mean it will definitely come, but if you don't build the house, you never know. Okay, I did say to you that I would show you my artwork as well, and it looks like it's a long job in progress. You can see there my bee from last time we were drawing and my dot artwork. It's coming along, but I think I'm going to have some homework to do this weekend. Okay, guys, I'll go back over to you. Thanks, Nicole.
Fantastic, Tristan. How awesome to be able to see that making of a mud brick to help along our blue-banded bees. So that's a really great example of how simple it can be. So we should all be doing whatever we can to provide the best extra home or the helping hand we can to all of our solitary bees that need our help. So we can see here an example of one like Tristan showed you. That's not the only way to do it. You can make it really very simple. So when we go through our next slide, we can see some simple materials that we can use and some tips on how best to do that. So as I mentioned here again, we can see some bamboo sticks, but if it's not bamboo, there are other ways that you can find of just using maybe a brick and pushing in some particular woody materials or other types of stems that might not already have a hole in it, that they can make the hole in for themselves. But here's some special tips that I'll let you know about, which is that size definitely matters. We need to have a good size to encourage the types of bees we want, but not too big, because that's when pests tend to come along, and also nothing too chunky. So we want to make it really accessible for these native bees to come into. Spread them around the garden, like Tristan said. Really give them lots of options of where they can be. Sometimes the bee will prefer to be in a sunnier spot, a shadier spot, somewhere tucked away, somewhere more out in the open. But see if you can do a bit of an experiment. If you make a few of those mud bricks, for example, or a few solitary bee homes, put them in different areas and do some ongoing research about which bees are coming to where. So also to make sure it's not wobbly, so they're nice and sitting firmly wherever you put them, facing the early morning sun, and lots of different materials. That's what that word there, diversify, means, just like diversity, a variety of different materials. Now we're going to do another quick poll before we go on to some really important bee looking after information. Go ahead, Glenn.
Okay, so I've put the last question up there for you guys. I could improve the bee habitat by including what in my yard? So you've got 5 choices there. This is a single choice question, not a multiple choice. So you have to choose the best one. Okay. And I think Nicole gave us lots of hints a minute ago, and you might even see some of them still on your screen there. Okay, so remember, it's one choice. If you made a mistake, you can just pick a different one. So if you could improve a bee habitat, what would you put in your yard? All right. It's like most of you have now thought of your answer. So I am going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share those results with you. So it looks like 70% of you were clearly thinking, and the last one, all of the above, would be the best answer, because all of those things are going to improve the environment for bees in your yard. And some of you might have bees at school too. So think about what you could do for bees at your school. So I'm just going to stop sharing that and finish up Nicole. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. And last tips from me, although it looks like from that poll that you're pretty much all over it. I'm not sure if that's for those of you who've been with us from the beginning, but or just really good logical thinking and listening. But we've got there definitely, they need to have things to eat all year round, not just in springtime and summertime. So think about what you're planting at your place and your school. Avoiding pesticides is really important. So pesticides are a chemical that is used to get rid of what we call pests, but actually might be quite helpful in our garden if we do a bit more learning about what they are. But those pesticides are definitely not good for our native bees. So if you are putting your solitary bee homes around the garden, maybe really be thoughtful about and talk to mum and dad about the best spot where they won't be too impacted by those pesticides, but it's best just to not use them at all, I say. So also the additional habitat, which we've talked about and which hopefully you'll get a chance to do over the weekend, preferably outside if mum and dad don't want you in the kitchen, and also a water source, as many of you said. Now, importantly, like in that picture in the top right, there are pebbles in the water source because bees aren't able to hover and drink at the same time. They need to land somewhere to be able to drink. So when you're providing that water source, make sure you put some pebbles in the water so they can do that safely. And also lots of rest stops. So many of our native bees can't travel long distances, really nothing more than over, say, 500 meters is the most. So when we are looking at creating habitat, whether it's through plants or the hotels or both, making sure we've got lots of rest stops for them along the way. That means lots of flowers for food and water and shelter as they all need. So looking around your garden, up and down your street, and even in your school to make sure there's plenty of places for them to go. Thanks so much, everyone. It's been great to be with you. And Glenn's now going to go through some details about how you can share your amazing work with us. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Nicole. So everybody, if you don't know where our website is, we're called the Observatory Hill Environmental Education Centre. So all the information that you saw today is on our online learning page, and you can see in the menu next to secondary programs, there's the online learning. If you click that, you'll find the Biodiversity and Pollinators website. So all the information about all 6 lessons are in there. We hope that you can join us next week when we're going to be talking again about the life cycle of plants and how plants are need pollinators to help them to spread their seeds around. So we're going to be focusing more on plants next week. But we're going to finish up now by saying thank you for joining us today. We would like you to answer a short survey, which will pop up once I end this webinar. There's a couple of quick questions. And don't forget, if you have a question, then you can write that on the survey and we will answer the question on our webinar. Okay, so we hope you have fun on the weekend, maybe thinking about those things Tristan showed you. Don't forget, we'll be back next week at 1:30 to learn more about biodiversity and pollinators. But for now, it's goodbye from everybody at Observatory Hill. Have a great weekend and enjoy going back to school next week. We hope you have fun learning for the rest of the year. Okay, so bye everybody.